Hi, and welcome to Pursuit Grad, a Pursuit PR mentorship community. We hope to inspire, empower, and connect mentors and mentees.
Today's guest is Jeff Shouger, SVP of Finance at Niantic Inc. He's going to discuss his career path and how he landed Niantic and his journey along the way. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about what you do for people that aren't aware. What exactly it is that you do and your background?
How far do you want me to go back? Do you want me to go back to like growing up in the Bay Area, how I landed in finance, or just kind of pick it up from the Zynga years, which are kind of the most some of the most interesting years.
Yeah, maybe start with how you landed in finance and take us through your journey.
Yeah. So I grew up in the Bay Area during the 80s, early 90s. Was trying to figure out where I'd go to school. It was going to be somewhere in California. And so I landed down in San Diego. And during my time in San Diego, I thought, wow, can you guys hear my dog?
We do.
It's a great thing about being at home. It's just real. That's what really happens every day. So it's San Diego. I figured, what am I going to study? Is it going to be management? Is it going to be finance? It's going to be accounting. And I landed on accounting because it was a trade. And accounting led me to my first job outside of school, which was working for the big six at the time. There were six large accounting firms: Anderson, KPMG, Price Waterhouse. Well, after the Enron debacle, there ends up being, only four. A couple of the firms went away and combined with the others. I ended up landing in the Bay Area, working in Palo Alto, kind of working all the way from San Jose to San Francisco, working with a ton of tech companies, big names that like Intuit, SanDisk, Genentech, Gilead Sciences, and really got to see all different levels of finance and decided that, I wanted to work for a company and a team to be able to, build something pretty special on my own and support entrepreneurs. And so my first opportunity to do that was with a biotech company called Proteolix, which made a drug for multiple myeloma, which is the second most prevalent blood cancer after leukemia. And we had, it had an unmet medical need, and so the FDA gave it an accelerated approval pathway, which really shrank the development time to bring the drug to market, kind of like we see with the vaccines for COVID today. Well, this was a pretty sought after drug that was unpartnered. A year into working with Proteolix, we got an opportunity to sell the company. So we took the company to the market and we sold it to a company called Onyx Pharmaceuticals, which eventually sold out to Amgen for about $1 billion in 2009. From there, I decided to make another move and got the opportunity to work with Zynga at the time. And it's important to note that my opportunity to work with Zynga was really based on my network and the folks that I met working through Ernst & Young for about 8 years. The CFO at Zynga at the time was an Ernst & Young alumni. They were growing on the back of really Facebook's growth at the time. And he hired me in to be the assistant controller. I was assistant controller working through the IPO. We filed to go public in June of 2011, went effective in December of 2011. Raised $1 billion in that IPO, $10 billion market cap. The IPO was the largest offering since Google at the time. And really that set the stage for the company to, kind of be an everlasting, ongoing company by being well-financed, being public, and having more than $1 billion in revenue. I spent about 5 years scaling the finance department, working with the CEO, working with strategic finance on a number of deals. And then I took off in about 2015 and ultimately landed to where I am today, working with Niantic, helping them scale and grow our company, which is best known for the Lightship platform, and which Pokemon Go runs on. And so that's kind of how I kind of navigated to where I am today.
Great. So what? Tell us about any challenges if someone's particularly trying to come up in finance right now. What might they expect? As some of the key challenges, maybe early on in the career, and then as you develop.
Yeah, there's a few different pieces to finance. There's the accounting side, there's the planning and banking side, and then there's also the tax side. So sitting in the seat of the head of finance or CFO position, you really need to be able to kind of navigate all those different categories of finance. And as someone that's starting out and thinking about what they want to do long term, I really think it's important to really be keenly interested in finance, being finding out what you love to do and what you're curious about, because that's really going to propel you through the many years and the long term work that you need to do to grow your career over time.
You hear me?
And so, yeah, I can hear you. And then in terms of challenges, I mean, there's a number of different challenges. I think challenges can be, one on the side of setting up systems and processes and working through Excel spreadsheets and that type of stuff. But they can also, as you evolve your career, it's a lot about cross-functional work and how you communicate, how you work with people. And ultimately, as you progress in your career, how you lead in an organization and how you develop the team behind you, it really allows you to be the best person that you can be.
And you kind of mentioned that you had 8 years at EY. I'm sure that's where you developed all your skills, but how does one really just go about that? Do you just thrust yourself in any possible situation? Are you able to say, hey, I want to work in tech areas and work there, or you just go with wherever the wind blows and you just learn from there and then accumulate knowledge, and then after a period of time, see what the reservoir is and go from there?
Yeah, those are good questions. I mean, when I think back to how it worked for me, there's guardrails on to kind of what you're going to be doing, working with a large accounting firm or an investment bank. I think the two things that, really differentiate those experiences and make those really good experiences is you're going to get exposure to a ton of companies. I mentioned that just a handful of the companies that I got exposure to at the time at Ernst & Young. What you see there is how companies are really successful and how they do it well. And you see how companies may not do so well. And really, believe it or not, you learn more from the companies that do things poorly, have failed. That's when you learn kind of what not to do. And then the flip side of it is it's about the people. You start with a start class. Back in those days, it could be 100 people. That's your network that you end up leveraging over the long term. And so when I left Ernst & Young and I went over to Zynga, I got the opportunity to build a team that ended up being 100 people, spanning all across the globe. We were an international company. A lot of the people that I pulled were from, my people that I had met at Ernst & Young along the way. And I knew, they were good caliber people. They were really interested in finance. And, that's how I was able to leverage that experience.
That sounds pretty incredible. So you work at Ernst & Young, like you said, you have 100 members each year. There's probably thousands of people that work there. Especially now with today's climate, and even when, back in your day, how does one really stand out in a crowd? Is it more of just clear cut black and white, hey, I'm productive, I'm great at my work? Or is it more of that social dynamic, like, putting that work to get to know people, ask right questions, and learn from them? Like, how does that go about?
Yeah, that's a great. It's interesting. Like, I think in the media these days, you'll hear about the entrepreneur that just kind of came out of nowhere with a company. That's really young. And it has this company that's blowing up. Maybe Evan Spiegel at Snap, or the Collison brothers over at Stripe. And I think while like that is the way it's portrayed, within finance and even within those entrepreneurial companies, there's a lot about perseverance and persistence along the way. There's going to be, times when you can accelerate your career, but there's going to be times too when, that you have to work on your fundamentals to get yourself ready for that next jump. And so, at E&Y, and even at Zynga, or where I'm at today, I think it's kind of like balancing that is like, when to push it, when to be a better, it's about the team, focusing on the team and what the goals are of the team, and then looking for opportunity along the way. So for me, when I started at Ernst & Young, I started in public accounting in 1999. So it was a .com era, and everything was blowing up, pets.com, anything that you took public, the stock blew up and people were making money left and right. And so, a lot of people get enamored with that. But then there was a .com bust in 2000. And so I remember driving down the 101 freeway, and I don't know if you guys are familiar. You guys you and Rachel live in the East Coast, but the 101 kind of goes straight down the peninsula from San Francisco to San Jose. And you get on this freeway every day, and as the economy, was getting hotter and hotter, I mean, like your commute time got longer and longer. And then after the bust, you could get to work in 10 minutes. And so during that period, I was really fortunate to continue to have employment. I was and then work through that time of like the market resetting itself. And during that period, I was promoted from a senior all the way up to senior manager. And I think that really set the stage for me to then make a move in 2009 and leave the firm and, go and work for Proteolix and then Zynga. And so there's like this balancing of figuring out like, what's best for you, how to balance with the team, and make sure that you're actually learning along the way. Because the fundamentals I learned at Ernst & Young really set the stage for me to be, the best person I am today, within finance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you talked about some pretty pressure cooker type environments, especially when you started, right? So you've obviously worked through the .com bust. You've worked through the credit crisis. We've got the pandemic. Maybe there's some other pivotal moments that you've experienced. What are some ways now, especially everyone coming off the pandemic, that you're seeing just generally, make it easier for people, or how do you manage? It's stressful working in these kinds of global crises, right? So how do you manage, that to get your job done in Excel?
Yeah. It's funny, as you say, like the high stress environments. I mean, there's some in my career that I remember were really good. Some that are tough. I can tell you a couple of stories about those. When I first arrived at Zynga, I remember the CFO telling me, you really have to hold on to this one. Like it's kind of like a bucking bronco. Like it's gonna move fast, and it's gonna be hard to hold on. And the only way you're gonna be able to do it is be able to like level up, manage, and get good people around you. And that was a little bit different than Ernst & Young, where you had a lot more work that you needed to do day to day, like versus manage. And he was absolutely right. But it was super exciting because I arrived there in, it was September 2010. We ended up filing the first S1 in July of 2011. And so I had, 11 short months to try to hire up a team, get everything fixed, and be able to file in S1. And, we would find ourselves like out at the printers, working 24/7, getting everything together for the IPO. The cool thing about it is, you're working late nights, you're, building good teams. And, as you would walk in and out every day, you'd see CNBC on at the printers, and they'd be, talking about, we think confidentially, we think Zynga is, starting to file their registration statement. And you're like, wow, this is cool. They're talking about it on CNBC, and we're doing this, doesn't get any better than that. So
Really motivating.
Yeah. And I wrote a blog on this about how to be successful within finance. And the main point of it was, building and developing great teams. And, so how do you do that? You have to create pathways for people. You have to give people more than you think that, sometimes I hear this from people that are managing others. They're saying, oh, so-and-so is a staff and, they're not ready for this. I think you kind of got to give people, maybe 110% of what you think they can handle to kind of push them just to get to the next level, and give them that, opportunity to do something new, to do something that's stretching themselves. And, that way they can get better.
Right.
So that's something, that I've kind of focused on, is giving people new opportunities. One of the things I do today, within my group, is, for our audit committee meeting or our compensation committee meeting, I'll have our corporate controller or head of reporting run those meetings. I help give them prepared. I work on a talk track with them. I, rehearse with them. Some folks help me rehearse. And, when we go into those meetings, that actually gives me the ability to, step back, increase my executive presence, have them present, and then have me, fill in more thought leadership. And so it's a win-win for everybody. So Zynga was a great example of a good time being stressed and working through that. Through COVID, when COVID hit, at Niantic, that was stressful in a different way, kind of resetting the expectations of the board, resetting the company. Great thing is we were able to adapt and move through that and actually create a stronger company on the backside than we had, going into the pandemic.
That's fantastic. And it sounds like you're serving as a mentor towards your team, and helping them become their best self. You kind of touched on the CEO or maybe CFO of Zynga was a Deloitte alum, E&Y alum also. And so how did this mentorship form with you and them? Did you seek them and say, hey, would you be my mentor? Or you just start asking questions and a friendship happened? How does that go about, and how critical was that for your success?
Yeah, it's that's a great memory that you bring up. Mark Vranish was the CFO at Zynga. He had an interesting career where, he worked at Ernst & Young, worked at a company called SupportSoft that Mark Pincus founded. And then, when Mark Pincus moved on, was trying to figure out the next thing he was going to do, Mark, went to another company. Mark Vranish went to another company. And then when Pincus founded Zynga, he pulled Mark in, or Vranish. So there's two Marks, so we would call Mark Vranish Mal.
You don't have to name names. You could just,
Yeah. Anyhow, the long and the short of it is that when the CFO at Zynga hired me on, I think there was, there's kind of two parts to it. One is, like I said, the relationship, and one is the fundamental work you do. And, you really have to do your best to foster and nurture both those. And I think the CFO at Zynga found, for me, that, he was somebody that, or I was somebody he could invest in. And that created this informal mentor-mentee relationship. And I think what it taught me was that, I had to pay that forward and do that for other people, and that the only way to get leverage is developing your teams. And really what you should try to do is leverage yourself, almost kind of like out of a job. Like if I have nothing to do next year because everybody else is doing it, that's actually a good thing, because then I can go find, more that I can do for the company and the organization. And it doesn't need to be like within just the pure walls of finance. It can be thought leadership. It can be looking at strategic partnerships. And that's where actually having the most fun in my career has been. And then also, I think the main point is not to be, shy or insecure about, having and teaching everybody every single thing about your job, so much so that you become irrelevant. Like, it's great to become irrelevant. It just gives you opportunity to do more in different things.
That's actually a great comment.
It's really interesting because sometimes if there is someone that's, really shining, you want to make sure that you're fostering that versus hindering or competing. Because if you're the leader and your team's doing well, you're really all winning. It's good. It's a good thing, right? For your team to be succeeding and you to grow and try new things.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if somebody can play point guard better than me, let them play it. I'll go coach, or, maybe I'll go play center.
Right. Yeah. Humility, is definitely it's kind of coming through as a key theme.
Yeah, that is definitely, and that's one of the great things about the Niantic organization in particular. Not a lot of egos, a lot of humility, and you're right. I think that humility pays off. People know you're personable, approachable, and finding the balance to be direct as well.
Right.
Like I kind of have this process where I give feedback every single day, every step of the way, so that when you get to the end of the year, there's not really any surprises. I never believed in, like getting to the end of the year, giving somebody their performance review and say, by the way, these 4 or 5 things didn't go well. Like we take the approach of, fail fast, pivot, as long as it's not catastrophic. Let's just all move forward. People are going to make mistakes. And you should be making mistakes at a venture-backed startup company. If you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough.
Right.
Has there ever been like a holy cow moment, like, wow, I can't believe I'm sitting in this room or talking on the phone with so-and-so because, like, this person's so influential, so powerful, and, like, I'm kind of, like, awestruck by them, like, who, you know what I mean? Like, and how do you come up with the courage? How do you overcome the courage?
Can I name names in this one, Matt?
Whatever you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are, well, I never had been so awestruck that I didn't figure out what to say, or, hadn't been able to perform, but there's definitely been those awestruck moments. I mean, that's the fortunate thing through working with these successful companies is, you get the opportunity to meet Masayoshi Son, the head of SoftBank, Peter Gerber, who ran Sony Entertainment and is a co-owner of the Golden State Warriors. Those are some really good moments. But I think the real takeaway of those moments is, that goes back to the whole thing we were talking about earlier, is you can't come in day one. I mean, you always have those anomalies where the person comes in day one and they are, the quarterback of the Super Bowl team. But a lot of us have to work hard, persevere,
Right.
be persistent. There's some good times and bad times. And, if you can persevere and persist through that stuff, and, you'll find the time to shine. And then you have those moments that create the stories that you want to tell everybody. And that's kind of the payback, being able to have those fun experiences through your career.
Yeah, that actually sounds pretty awesome. So based on experiences, and you're a finance guy, so I got to ask you, back when I, first applied for my first job out of school, I first started Morgan Stanley working fixed income derivatives during the whole meltdown. It was quite the situation. So I was asking people, picking their brains for like, interview advice. And some people would say about, payment, like never ask about salary. It's the one question you should never ask during an interview. Like it's a taboo. And someone else saying, what are you, crazy? You need to ask. This is what your livelihood is this. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Is it more about experience? Is it about salary? At what point should you care about salary or experiences? And what are your thoughts, as the guy who's head of the head count?
Yeah. I think it depends where you're at in your career. In early in your career, it's about, and like we tell people this, when they start the job, whatever job within our department, is like ask all those questions early, learn as much as you can. I think that really applies, in a major way, early in your career. It's like not about, $5,000 here or there. It's not about, just a couple bucks here and there. I think later in your career, from all of the work that you've done over a 20-year period, then, I think there's a shift to reaping the benefits or the fruits of your labor. And so I think it's, you have to calibrate where you're at in your career. And with that said, like, I do think, when offers are given to people, it's fair to ask, like, is this fair? Sometimes just asking that simple question, is this fair what I'm getting here? People will go back and come back and give you more.
Oh, wow.
So you recommend that negotiating?
Well, like, I mean, and different companies take different stances on it. Like, I think I read something from Coinbase recently where, their policy is like, here's your offer. Like, that's it. They don't negotiate. So I think you have to calibrate that along the way. And then I think there's two things to think about too, is like where you're at in your career. Like, is this one for experience? Or is this one, is it the time to go for, like compensation? And yeah, so I think you got to kind of balance that. Does that make sense, or what do you think about my response?
It sounds good.
That makes sense. You have to really know your audience, and
There's no clear-cut answer. You got to go with your gut instinct. Sounds to me.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's pay disparities between different, like, groups and stuff to that effect. And so, when I look and, like, I talk to my wife about like what she's doing, like I do tell her, I say, just ask if it's fair, and sometimes like we've seen like folks come back and, increase the offer. And like, I think that's sometimes a nice way to say it.
Are there ways in the finance world to figure out what fair compensation is, like market research on what people generally make at a certain position in-house or firm?
Yeah, there's a number of benchmarking firms out there. I think that the market is moving on us right now very rapidly. We're seeing, like, while the market research firms will show you, some guardrails to where things can be, we're seeing a standard deviation that's pretty far from the mean in different areas. And so, I mean, you could go on the internet, search Google, and find, various different benchmarking studies. There's a number of recruiting firms, here in the Bay Area that provide those for free. You can always access those, online. But I think, like, also, this market is moving on us pretty rapidly.
Yes. And let's just revert to, what you're doing today, or fast forward to it. Let's talk a little more about, for people who may not be aware of what exactly Niantic is, the Lightship platform, and Pokemon Go. Like, we'd love to learn more about that and, what you're doing there.
Yeah, Niantic is a company that started within Google, like, in between 2013 and 2015. It was started by a founder. Our founder's name is John Hankey. His history has been in developing games in the late 90s and developing maps in the early 2000s. He's most famous for creating Google Maps, the most widely used app for mapping on every phone today. And when after running Google Maps for 10 years, he went to Larry and Sergey and used his political capital to develop his next project within Google. And he was spending a lot of times with AR and VR, and found augmented reality to be more interesting because it could happen outdoors in the real world to allow for real world social experiences, and then make the world a more interesting place, overlaying it with AR experiences. His first application was Field Trip, and so this was, imagine a world where you're walking through San Francisco, and it would tell you various interesting things about San Francisco, not where the Starbucks or Radio Shack is, but more history of the city. His next application was a game called Ingress. Ingress was pretty much a cult hit, had 20 million downloads, and really proved the concept of gaming outside in the real world. And then from there, John thought, how can I move this from a cult hit to really something that's adored all across the world? And so there was a lot of discussion about layering in different pieces of intellectual property within a game. Pokemon Go seemed like the perfect fit. We spun the company out in 2015. The game, Pokemon Go, launched on the Lightship platform in July of 2016, and really, set the world on fire with droves of people running down the street playing Pokemon Go. Right. The game has been a top grossing app ever since. And really, like, the next step for Niantic is unlocking all the power that you see and all the experiences you see in Pokemon Go to developers and creators all across the world by opening up our platform, which is in beta currently.
That's awesome. And we actually, watched, the Berkshire Hathaway quarterly earnings, and it kind of inspired us to get a book on, Warren Buffett's excerpts from his past, 20, 30, whatever many years he's been doing it. And one of the things that captured us was this quote saying, here's what I want to know when I'm meeting with people. I want to hear the big vision from the CEO, and I want to hear numbers from the CFO. Because accounting is really the language of business. So how do you juggle dealing with the accounting world and terms, and then dealing with such revolutionary tech and trying to explain that to investors?
Yeah, you have to find a good balance. I think there is, there's your business here today, there's what you're executing on, and then your long-term vision of tomorrow. And then, the accounting is an important aspect because it creates a framework for everybody to measure and benchmark against each other. And, to me, it's somewhat of a differentiating quality of certain CFOs. Certain CFOs will be, focused on the story of the business, and certain CFOs will be very inwardly focused or focused, only on the metrics and the numbers. And then you can kind of find yourself in a balance. For me, I'm somebody that, came up from the accounting side, got my fundamentals from working through a controllership position, but have the ability to really tell the story. And so where I like to play is kind of in between, both of those. And so, does that answer your question, Matt? I think, there is revolutionary tech, but there is also our games and experiences we have today. And the important point is to be able to set goals and milestones in order to bring that revolutionary vision to the market, over time. It's something that's consistent with investors' expectations.
Right. That makes sense. Just more wondering, to people who are like, hey, these, all I care is the financials. It looks good. I don't really care what's going on. Or is it more like, hey, I need a mutual understanding of what you're actually doing here. I don't care how good the numbers are. And are you able, you know what I mean? Like that kind of juggling.
Yeah. I do. I do think, the best companies and the best way to do it is to really try to strike a balance. If you're purely vision focused, and ultimately the numbers will start to tell a story, and being able to balance that story along the way will give you the best fundamental footing to finance your company, raise capital, and grow your business.
Right. No, definitely. You want to, it sounds like the moral of the story is the numbers tell the story, they support the story, and it seems like today, to be successful, you really do need to be able to do both. You need to understand the big picture, but you also need to be able to zoom in and, make sure that accounting and corporate governance is under control.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think the CFO of yesterday was really focused on, making sure expenses were well under control, making sure you're running a tight ship, focused on corporate governance. A lot of that is table stakes for startup CFOs. And today, to differentiate yourself, it's figuring out, like, how do you facilitate the vision? How do you help drive investment and do it in a way that allows you to increase your valuation along the way and achieve really your long-term goals and long-term vision? Right.
And we'll open up for questions in a minute. Just one closing question. If you looked back, let's say at your 22, 25-year-old self, what would you tell yourself?
Get into something different. No, just kidding. What would I tell you? Make sure you find out what you're curious about, find out what you love to do, and then figure out, like, how to turn that into, a career, how to balance that into something that, you can, you can do every day and pay your bills and facilitate your life. I know that sounds kind of cliche-ish, but really, like, I do believe it, because ultimately, like, if you're not super interested in what you're doing, you're not going to be the best at it. You're not going to put your 110% at it. And it's funny because today, like, when usually for the most junior folks, someone on my team will be interviewing them first. And there's a lot of technical details about, how you do things that I'm not as close to these days. And I realize that. And I think, that takes some humility, like we were saying earlier. And, when I get involved in the interview process, that is the question that I usually ask my staff is, how curious is this person about what they're doing? Because if they're super curious, then, once they've asked 10 questions, they're going to ask like 2 more and make sure it's right, or 3 more just to find out, like, something else about it. And then ultimately, when we're presenting that to the CEO or the board, like, that's what you want. Somebody that's, like, kind of turned over all those stones. So then you can have a lot of confidence in your position when you're presenting it to the CEO, to the board, or to an investor.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. We actually just wrote a blog post about asking questions, and just, how important it is. When I was younger, my family had this really cool, like, artistic table where we had, like, snacks and games and whatever in the den. And around the perimeter, the artists thought it would be cool if we all contributed, like, a thought or a saying or inside joke. And there were probably a couple, but one of mine that I still remember was, I have a question. Because, I mean, granted, I was about probably 9 or 10 at the time, so I was probably asking a lot of questions about life. But it still kind of applies today, because, what we do at Pursuit PR, we have to be very inquisitive, gather information, make recommendations. But then, just in business, when you're in difficult situations, asking questions is a great way to get out of them. So, and we look for that too with our team. Like the more you ask, the more they're actually critically thinking.
My 2-year-old, what's that? What's that? What's that? He just runs around the house saying that all the time, and it's he's trying to figure everything out. Everything's new to him.
Right. Yeah, that's exciting.
Wait, just one more quick question. So when you look at when you have people interviewing for jobs and they give you a resume, do you look at what's important to you? Like when you see there, is it experiences? Is it what college they went to? Like, is it how they interact in person? What really stands out for someone who wants to work at Niantic?
Yeah, it's. I think it's a combination of those. Sometimes if it is, it depends on the level of the position. I'm trying to think to give very specific answers. If you're looking to hire somebody in accounting at a staff level, having Big Four experience is hard to beat because they have such a good recruiting program. They have such a good mentorship training program that you're going to be able to leverage a lot of their training that you wouldn't otherwise have at a venture-backed startup. On the planning side, banking experience pays off really well because there's a lot of training in terms of modeling that you see on the banking side, and the tax side, it's back to the Big Four. So I think those experiences people look for. Tenure sometimes at companies and at places. I mean, people definitely want to hold on to talent, and so if you're doing a good job, like typically having somewhat of a tenure can be a thing. I think there's something I didn't touch on earlier is like for new grads or people getting a start is having an experience at a company that really provides like dynamic scale. Like what I got from Zynga was the ability to see $1 billion company, to go through an IPO, to work with a company that had 3,000 people in international operations. So when I first started talking to John at Niantic and we had 60 people, I could easily like tell him here's what's going to happen when you scale up to 3,000 people in international locations. And, unfortunately, the only way to get that experience is like going through it. And so, as you're picking, the companies you want to work for, being careful to kind of make sure that you're balancing your time with getting those experiences, because that's what's going to help facilitate, your career over the long term.
Yeah, that's great information.
And why don't we open it up?
Before we do that, is there anything else you want to share that we didn't ask, or anything that you just, we might have glossed over?
No, I think we covered a lot of it. Really big proponent of developing people and developing teams over the long term. Like that's how you get scale, and that's how you, improve your leadership skills. Assuming you want to be a leader over the long term.
Awesome.
Great. This is very interesting. So if anyone, has any questions, we can just open it up for a few minutes.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure either way. Just you can raise your hand actually is the way, and then I'll call on you.
All right. Not all at once, please.
All right. Okay. Well, this is a very informative discussion.
Like, did Gail raise her hand?
I don't see.
So it was a while ago.
But if you did, you can. If you see her, you can tap her.
Yeah. Okay. Invite to speak. Is Gail there still? Yes, it says invite to speak.
There we go.
Super, really informative and helpful. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Do you have a question for Jeff?
Now I had a comment for all of you. Your questions were terrific, and Jeff, it was really super informative.
I appreciate
Thank
that,
you
Gail.
so much.
Thank you.
All right.
That's some good feedback.
All right, great. No, this is great. And, just in closing, Jeff is just a great example of someone who really worked his way up and, has really done just some amazing things. So someone we are excited to share with the whole community to get to know.
Yeah, and even more so, like, we're lucky to have people not just of the caliber experience in the workplace, but also the caliber of a nice guy, a good individual, and to be generous with his time to share with us. We're really appreciative of that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Matt and Rachel. Love working with the two of you, and love the opportunity. Looking forward to doing it again.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining.
Take care.
See you soon.
See ya. Bye.